Okay, we're going to get started. Just so everybody knows, this webinar is going to be recorded. So in case you come in late or in case you have to leave early, you don't have to worry about missing anything. We'll be able to put it on our website and onto YouTube so people can review this information after. And just one thing with the Zoom, if you look into the chat function, there should be two options. One is going to be chatting with the hosts and panelists. Those chat messages will go directly to us three. However, if you select everybody or everyone, then everybody will be able to see that. So you'll be able to share your messages with everybody in attendance. So with that, let's move on to the webinar. So this webinar is part of a 9-session series designed to help Native Americans with disabilities understand their rights and develop self-advocacy skills to access needed services that enable them to live in their communities. This free series is open to people with disabilities, their families, and other supports. So today, this webinar is going to feature Alexis de la Cruz, who is an attorney with the Native American Disability Law Center, and it will also feature Renee Garcia-Aguirre, who will be discussing the Supporting Inclusive Practices in Colleges program at Northern Arizona University. I'll pass it over to Alexis and Renee to give a more full introduction of themselves and their roles.
Hi, everybody, and good afternoon. I'm really happy to see so many folks joining us. It's my pleasure to be here. Like Austin said, I am an attorney at the Native American Disability Law Center. I primarily do the law center's education work. So I work with students with disabilities and families to address educational matters, including in the post-secondary education world, which is what we'll be talking about this afternoon. Happy to be here with you.
Hello, everyone, and my name is Renee Garcia-Aguirre. I'm here as a campus coordinator and education coach for SIPC. Basically, our program is a transition program for individuals with intellectual disabilities looking to get advice and guidance on how to transition to college and also get services in relation to self-advocacy. So I thank very much the NADLC for allowing me to speak today, and I'm looking forward to presenting further on the program later.
Okay, so thank you. So as I said, today's webinar is Native Americans with Disabilities Empowered through Self-Advocacy, Supports and Accommodations for Students with Disabilities in Post-Secondary Education. First, a few guidelines. It would help us if you could provide your name or agency and tribal affiliation in the chat. If you're an individual with a disability, or if you're a parent, advocate, self-advocate, professional, or other. The way we're going to do this webinar is we'll have a Q&A section at the end if anybody has questions they wanted to be addressed. But if you type in your questions in the chat as we go along, we'll try to do our best to answer those as well. Again, this webinar will be recorded and posted on the NADLC website, and then a survey will go out after the webinar, which will be used to improve outreach and services. So with that, who is the Native American Disability Law Center? The Law Center provides advocacy, referral information, and educational resources to all Native Americans with disabilities living in the Four Corners region. We monitor facilities on the Navajo Nation, including group homes, detention centers, to ensure persons with disabilities are provided with the services they need in the least restrictive environment. We also provide legal advocacy and representation in disability-related discrimination, including housing, employment, education, voting, and others. And we also provide advocacy and legal representation to Native American students with disabilities and education-related issues. So with that, I will pass it to Alexis.
Thank you, everybody. And again, thank you, Austin, for that introduction and that preview. I might just add a couple of more things quickly about our program in case there are any participants here who are not familiar with the Law Center. We have offices in Farmington, New Mexico and Flagstaff, Arizona. And our service area that we provide direct services includes the Navajo Nation, Hopi, Havasupai, and the Pueblo communities in New Mexico. So if you ever have a question about your rights, or you are working with an individual with a disability and might have questions about any of the topics that Austin mentioned, please don't hesitate to contact us. At the end of the presentation, we do include our contact information, including our website, but just in case folks want to capture it right now, it's nativedisabilitylaw.org, and you can learn more about the Law Center, the work that we do, and myself and our colleagues. So today, I'm going to be talking about supports and accommodations for students with disabilities in post-secondary education. I'm going to start by briefly talking about what transition services are under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and the Individual Education Plan Review. Then we're going to talk about what is post-secondary education. What exactly do I mean when I say post-secondary education? Then we'll transition into the legal section of our presentation this afternoon, and we'll talk about what rights protect students with disabilities as they transition from high school to post-secondary education. We'll talk about the Navajo Nation Civil Rights on Individuals with Disabilities Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Lastly, I will provide some advocacy tips for success and to make sure that as young people, their families, and their supports are thinking about transition from high school to post-secondary education opportunities, that everything is in line so that that's a smooth transition, which is everybody's goal. And as Austin mentioned, it's my preference if folks have questions during the presentation, rather than have you hang on to them or write them down and hope you remember, please feel free to interrupt me. If we were all together in a room in person, I would certainly want to take questions as they were coming up. So don't be shy. I'm happy to answer questions as they might come up. Thank you. Austin, next slide, please.
Yeah. And sorry, just real quick, I forgot to mention, I believe if you raise your hand as well, then if you don't want to type out your question and would rather ask it verbally, we can do that as well. Thanks.
Okay, so like I mentioned, we're going to start with a brief overview of transition services under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and the IEP process, and talk a little bit about how that law is different than the legal protections that a student with a disability will avail him or herself of as they transition out of high school. So the IDEA, or it's often called IDEA, is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is a civil rights act that ensures that eligible students with disabilities are provided a free, appropriate public education, or FAPE, pursuant to an individual education plan, or an IEP, in the least restrictive environment, or LRE, based on that student's unique individual need. I know that those are a lot of words and acronyms to try to remember, but this is probably the law that most of our folks who are gathered here this afternoon are familiar with. This is the law that makes sure that students, and to be eligible, a student has to meet one of 13 eligibility criteria under the IDEA. So there are very specific categories that allow students with disabilities to avail themselves of these protections. The IEP is the document that drives a student's individual programs, an individual's educational program. And what this law is intended to do is to promote successful elementary, middle, and high school educations, so that a student with a disability is ready to seek post-secondary high school training, job, or college opportunities. Next slide, please. Again, and I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. We are going to have our next webinar, which will be held in approximately 2 weeks, is going to focus more intensively on the nuts and bolts of transition services and planning with the IEP process in high school. But I just want to sort of orient everybody that what we're talking about is moving beyond IDEA and IEP and really talking about the legal rights and protections that are in place in the post-secondary education setting. So again, with IDEA and the IEP, transition services must begin no later than when a student turns 16 years old, but can start as soon as 14 years old. And these transition services are a very specific targeted set of goals and services that are intended to ensure that a student with a disability who is in high school, that all of the education planning and all of that student's educational programming is aligned with his or her future goals. And this is a point that I like to stress to my clients and their families and other individuals who work with students with disabilities is the planning can begin as early as 14. So a student doesn't have to wait until 16, which is generally the sophomore junior year. Transition planning can start as early as 14 if that is appropriate and what an individual student requires. So we're just going to play with an example here. Let's say a student with a disability who has an IEP wants to be a baker. For that student, what this would look like in practice is making sure that the IEP includes job, let's start, let me take a step back. It might start with job exploration. What does it take to become a baker? Do you have to go to college to become a baker? Do you have to have a particular skills training to become a baker? Do you have to go to culinary school? So a very like an initial activity might be, let's learn about the career. What does the career require? And then that way the 14 or the 15 or the 16-year-old student knows, okay, I can go to culinary school, but I don't have to. I can do an apprenticeship in a nice bakery and learn how to do it there. Or I can go to college and bake later. So there's a lot of options. And my point here is just, it really is about helping the student understand that there are a lot of skills that can be put into place and services to ensure that the student, when he or she is ready to graduate and becomes a baker, has already had some of that experience. So they can start exploring what the career takes. They can start doing on the job training. So if, for example, a student in the junior year or senior year wants to do an internship at Basha's and work in the Basha's bakery, the IEP allows that student to receive whatever supports he or she needs to. This is an important point. An IEP that would include all of those services we were just talking about with our baker example is only in place during, well, technically elementary, middle, and high school years, but what we're talking about here is in high school. An IEP does not follow a student to post-secondary education. And this is something that I try to talk to students and their families and supports about early on, because I think there's some misunderstanding and misinformation that a student with a disability who had an IEP in high school then gets an IEP in college, and that's not accurate. The IEP does not follow a student. We'll talk about when an IEP might become relevant in the post-secondary setting, but it's really important to understand that these are several different laws that provide different protections, and it's IDEA and IEP in high school, but not after that. Instead, there are new laws that protect you as a student with a disability in the post-secondary education setting, and we'll talk about those here shortly. And like I said, I know I went through the IDEA and the IEP process a little quickly, but we are going to have a more in-depth presentation in 2 weeks about those rights and how to successfully plan for a student's transition if he or she's interested in post-secondary education or jobs training, or basically planning post-high school. What is the student going to do once he or she graduates from high school? Next slide. Okay, so post-secondary education, what does that mean? So the United States Department of Education has said that post-secondary education can include vocational and career schools and 2- and 4-year colleges and universities. More broadly, basically, it's any educational opportunity after high school. And so it can look like a tech school. So if a young person is interested in becoming a mechanic, they can go to a trade school to learn the trades of how to be a mechanic. It can look like skills training, where you're getting on the job skills training so you can develop skills for a job that is more skills based. It can be a community college and it can be a tribal college. It can also be a more traditional 4-year college. Some of the examples are Northern Arizona University, Diné College, the University of New Mexico, and Navajo Technical University are just a few examples. As we had mentioned before, a student's legal rights and responsibilities change as a post-secondary student with a disability. Going back to the high school setting, when a student is protected by IDEA and has an IEP in place, there are very robust substantive and procedural protections in the IDEA that protects a student's education, and there are a lot of rights that are afforded to the student first, and then his or her parent or legal guardian if anything goes wrong with the education plan, the IEP, or the student has a concern. As a student with a disability in high school, from my perspective, that student doesn't really have responsibilities besides going to school every day and getting an education. I think that's true of all of our high school students and students in general. However, when a student begins to transition to the post-secondary setting, the legal protections are different, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And for the first time, the student with a disability is going to have a little bit more responsibility and have to take some affirmative steps to protect his or her rights under the laws that we're going to be talking about in a minute. Next slide. So again, just to preview, the laws that protect you as a student with a disability after high school is the Navajo Civil Rights of Individuals with Disabilities Act. I commonly refer to this as the Navajo Civil Rights Act. So I don't mean to confuse anybody, but my shorthand for this law is the Navajo Civil Rights Act. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And just as a sort of a caveat before we start diving into the legal protections, I just want everybody here to understand that it really does depend on where your school is located and maybe even who operates your school to depend on or to figure out which law potentially applies to you. And we'll talk about why that is in a little bit. Next slide, please. So in general, and again, just to reorient ourselves, we've graduated from high school. Yay. We have a high school diploma. We're going on to post-secondary education, might be at a 2-year school, might be at a tribal college, might be at a 4-year or a vocational school. But those programs cannot deny you admission because you have a disability. So unlike with the IDEA, where you had to fall in one of 13 eligibility categories, if you identify yourself as a person with a disability, whether that's a developmental disability, maybe it's a physical or an orthopedic impairment, or you have a visual impairment, mental health issue, regardless of how you identify yourself as a student or a person with a disability, those programs cannot deny you admission for the sheer fact that you have a disability. Again, the school does not have to provide you with a free, appropriate public education, but the schools do have to provide you with an appropriate academic adjustment to ensure that the school is not discriminating against you based on disability, on the basis of disability. So again, if you were used to hearing that word FAPE in high school, you're entitled to a FAPE. This is FAPE. You're not going to be getting FAPE in a post-secondary education setting. And again, you must identify yourself as a student with a disability. It is voluntary, so you're not required to, you're not forced to. But in order to get reasonable accommodations or academic adjustments, you must voluntarily identify yourself as a person with a disability. So, for example, if you are an individual who uses a wheelchair for mobility, you do not have to necessarily say, I have a physical impairment and I use a wheelchair for mobility, if you aren't asking the school to do anything different for your education. Similarly, if you are a student with a mental health issue and you aren't asking the school for a reasonable accommodation so you have more time on a test, for example, because maybe formal testing gives you anxiety, you don't have to identify that to your university or your vocational school or your tribal college, wherever you're attending. It's only if you want to ask for a reasonable accommodation or an academic adjustment in that setting. So again, it's your business and you're right if you share that you are an individual with a disability with your school, but you must do so in order to ask for the assistance you think you need to be successful in the post-secondary setting. Next question, please. Or slide, thank you. So what we're talking about is what kinds of academic adjustments or reasonable accommodations a student with a disability can ask for. So again, it really depends on what the individual's disability is and what the individual need is. So for example, it can include things like auxiliary aids and services, modifications to academic requirements as necessary to ensure access to equal educational opportunity. And again, really the whole idea here is we want to make sure that individuals with disabilities are provided the same access to opportunity as their non-disabled colleagues and other learners. So this is about ensuring that students with disabilities are able to obtain and have the same opportunities after high school as everybody else, even if that means making one or two accommodations or modifications in the post-secondary setting. So some other concrete examples are priority registration, reducing a course load, providing note takers, modifying the height of a desk, having an American Sign Language or other sign language interpreter, being provided extended time for testing, or asking for adaptive software or hardware for school computers or phones. So those can be speech readers if you require your software be read to you. Those are the types of accommodations you can ask for. And I'll just share a quick personal story here. So I'm the child of a father who was a quadriplegic and he was a wheelchair user. And my dad went back to a four-year university later in life after his vehicle accident that left him a quadriplegic. He didn't have a post-secondary degree at the time, but after his accident decided to go back to school, and I was so proud of him. But one of the things that my dad required as a wheelchair user and a person with a disability to be provided equal access was to have the height of the desks raised in his classrooms because his motor wheelchair wouldn't fit under the desk. And also because he had limited function in his hands, he was not able to write as quickly as some of the other students. He had an adaptive tool, but his hand would cramp and get really tired. So he also asked for a note taker. So throughout his 4 years in school, he had note takers who would take notes from lectures, and he was successful in getting desks raised so that he was provided equal access. So that's just a concrete example I like to share of what might be available to somebody who needs an accommodation in the post-secondary setting. Next slide, please. So is the sky the limit here? No, it is not. The school does not have to do a couple of things, even if you request an academic adjustment or a reasonable accommodation. So we're going to run through what the school does not have to do. So the school does not have to lower or substantially modify essential requirements. So for example, if you're a student with anxiety and you ask for more time to take a test, the school can provide that to you as an academic adjustment. You'll get extra time to take your test, but the substantive content of the test will remain the same. So if you are taking an English class and you are reading Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, you're going to have to take the same test that all of the other students are going to have to take about that book, but you might get additional time to accommodate you and your disability. The school does not have to make adjustments that would fundamentally alter the nature of a service program or activity. The school does not have to make adjustments that would result in an undue financial or administrative burden. And the school does not have to provide you with a personal care attendant, tutoring, typing, or devices for your personal use or your study, for example. Just a couple of quick points. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you've made a request for an accommodation and it's been denied for whatever reason, usually these types of disagreements are very, what lawyers call fact dependent and fact specific. There's not a cookie cutter analysis that says, well, this accommodation is financially feasible, but that one is going to cost too much money. If you run into an issue where you're not being provided an accommodation, we'll talk about what your rights are, but we always encourage you to give us a call at the Law Center and we can help you understand sort of what schools are looking at when a student is asking for an accommodation. And I just want to briefly mention here, and I'll talk about it in a few slides as well, even though the school might not have to provide you with personal care attendant or tutoring or typing or other devices, you can and should connect with your tribal or state vocational rehabilitation program, because that's another program that could provide you with additional supports and services. If your school is unable to provide you with something you're asking for or needing to be successful in the post-secondary setting. So for example, with my dad, he also is accessing vocational rehabilitation services, state VR services, and state VR helped him with the expenses of school books. And they helped him modify his van so that he could actually drive to school and go to his classes. So his school and vocational rehabilitation, those programs both provided him with some support. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. It's never too early to start learning about various programs and understanding how all the puzzle pieces fit together, because it can be complicated and overwhelming at times. Next slide, please. All right, now we're going to switch to the legal protections portion of the presentation. Austin, can you go back one?
Yeah.
No, that's okay. So we're going to talk briefly about the Navajo Civil Rights Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And depending on where your school is located and maybe how it's funded or who operates it, some or all of these laws might apply to you. Okay, go ahead. So we're going to start with the Civil Rights of Individuals with Disabilities Act. This was an act that was passed on the Navajo Nation in 2018. It is found in the amendments to 15 Navajo Nation Code, Section 604B, 10 Navajo Nation Code 1402, 13 Navajo Nation Code 4501 to 4510, and 4801 to 4809. I'm butchering that. If you ever want to find these laws, you can find them. They're publicly available on the Legislative Council's website, and I believe also the President's website if you want to read the law. This Navajo, the purpose of the law was to be in harmony with traditional and common law, that it's the policy of the Navajo Nation to respect, revere, and protect all individuals, their communities, and their unique qualities. So this was really the recognition of the Navajo Nation, that Navajo individuals with disabilities have rights, and that there is now a robust law in place to recognize those rights. And again, I'm going to be specific and only talk about the education context. My colleague Austin did a presentation recently about talking about this law in the employment context, and you can see that recording if you're interested in on our YouTube page. All right, Austin, go ahead. All right, so the definitions, the definition of disability in that act is that it's a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits an individual's ability to engage in one or more major life activities. Go ahead, Austin. And that law defines reasonable accommodation as a, quote, necessary and appropriate modification, not imposing a disproportionate or undue hardship needed to ensure a person with a disability is able to obtain access or participate in a particular right, benefit, or opportunity. So again, this is going to apply in the education setting to making sure that a Navajo individual with a disability is able to avail themselves of the same opportunities as any other student. And we've already talked about some of the academic adjustments or reasonable accommodations that that you can ask for in the post-secondary setting. Okay, next slide. So the education provision of the law is found at section 4505 of the Navajo Nation Civil Rights Act. And that says no student with a disability attending any school located on the Navajo Nation shall be denied a free, appropriate public education designed to meet, no student with a disability attending any school located on the Navajo Nation shall be denied a free, appropriate public education designed to meet his or her unique needs in the least restrictive environment. So I know some of you might be thinking that sounds a lot like what she was just talking about with the IDEA, and it is very, very similar. So just to be really specific here, we're just talking about the Navajo Nation Civil Rights Act. It does use some of the same words as the IDEA, but we have interpreted this to mean beyond high school, so that this would also apply to your tribal colleges and universities, that students with disabilities are provided a FAPE in those settings as well. So again, in the context of post-secondary education, this law allows students with disabilities to request reasonable accommodations from their post-secondary schools, like having a ramp built to allow a wheelchair user to access the building, or to allow a student more time to take a rest. All right. Next slide. All right, so with the Civil Rights Act, there are a couple of things we're going to talk about: medical evidence of disability, the undue hardship, and remedies. And I might be picking up the pace here just a little bit because I want to make sure my friend and colleague Renee has enough time for his presentation. So again, a school might ask you for medical evidence of your disability. So if you've received medical documents or you have a psychological evaluation, those documents might become relevant as you demonstrate you are indeed a person with a disability. Again, schools generally do not have to provide a reasonable accommodation or an academic adjustment that might cause an undue hardship to the school. And the only remedy with the Navajo Nation Civil Rights Act, if you believe that you've been discriminated against based on the basis of disability, is to file a complaint in the Navajo Nation courts. So unlike Section 504 in the ADA, which we're going to talk about in a minute, that have grievance procedures and some other administrative avenues that allow you to enforce those laws and your rights under those laws, the only remedy for the Navajo Nation Civil Rights Act is to file in Navajo court. Next slide. All right, and transitioning to, before I move to Section 504, like I said, it really depends on where your school is located and how it's operated, which laws potentially protect you as a student with a disability. The first one is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. You can find this law at 29 United States Code, Section 794. And this law basically prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in any program or activity that receives financial assistance from any federal agency. So pretty much any state or local post-secondary school, vocational school, you are going to be protected by Section 504 because virtually all of those programs receive federal dollars in one way or another. One caveat is in private schools. So if you go to a private 2-year post-secondary school or a private 4-year school, you're not protected by Section 504 because generally those schools are not receiving federal dollars. And this law ensures that students with disabilities are provided equal access to educational opportunity. Next slide. So under Section 504, disability is defined as any person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. Some examples of major life activities are seeing, hearing, walking, breathing, performing manual tasks, caring for oneself, and particularly for education, learning, thinking, concentrating, speaking, or working. Some examples of physical or mental impairments can be a visual or hearing impairment, a mobility impairment, HIV infection, developmental disability, drug addiction, or mental illness. And again, these are meant to be illustrative, not exhaustive. So these are just examples. Section 504 is a very, very broad law, and many people with disabilities are protected under it. So please don't think that you're limited to just these major life activities or just these listed physical or mental impairments. It's much broader than that, the eligibility for Section 504. Next slide, please. So under both the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504, the legal protections are virtually identical because Title II of the ADA were modeled on Section 504's protections. Both of these laws guarantee equal access in its programs, including extracurricular activities. Next slide. And briefly, the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990. It protects discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, and all public and private places that are open to the general public. Again, my colleague Austin did a presentation in the employment context. And so if you want to learn more about your rights in that setting, please go to nativedisabilitylaw.org or our YouTube channel to find that recording. It is important to note that tribes are largely exempt from the ADA. However, many tribes have either adopted the ADA or have said that they will follow the law. The Navajo Nation actually was ahead of the federal government and had a Civil Rights Act on the books before 1990 protecting the rights of Navajos with disabilities. But in general, the ADA does not apply to tribes. So that's just like I was saying, it's if you have a question about your legal rights and protections, please give us a call so we can talk through the specifics of your situation. Next slide. Title II of the ADA is what protects you in the post-secondary education setting context. It protects qualified individuals with disabilities under the ADA from discrimination on the basis of disability. The United States Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights enforces Title II, which does include practically every post-secondary school in the country, like we mentioned, except for private schools. Next slide. So now, most importantly, I want to talk briefly about some advocacy tips and how you can put what you've learned today to practice early on. The first, and I think the most important thing a student with a disability, his or her family or other service providers or supports can do is to start educating yourself now on post-secondary school opportunities, what the requirements are to attend the school, what your career and education goals are, and to familiarize yourself with the Disability Services Office and their procedures. This is so that you don't go to freshman orientation and say, hi, I'm Alexis and I have mental illness and I need an accommodation, and you don't know where to start. That way you're feeling really prepared and well-informed about your rights and who are going to be your contacts at your vocational school or your job training opportunity or your tribal college. Again, you would need to tell your school affirmatively and voluntarily that you do have a disability, and you want to share paperwork that supports that you have a disability. Now, this is where bringing your IEP to the post-secondary or 504 plan, IEP or 504 plan, to the post-secondary education setting can make sense. A lot of schools will accept these as evidence that you are a person with a disability, that your disability substantially limits one or more of your major life activities, and you're more likely to document for the post-secondary school that you do have a disability. Also, medical records are good. So if you have a doctor saying, yes, this young man is a person with autism, or yes, this young lady is an individual with a hearing impairment, the school can already see that you're well documented, that you do have a disability and some individual need related to that. Again, begin thinking about what kind of academic adjustments you will require and follow your school's specific process for asking for them. Next slide. As we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, it's also important to start thinking about getting connected to state or tribal vocational rehabilitation agencies for additional supports and services, especially if you think you might require any kind of a new evaluation to support your documentation as a person with a disability. Unlike with IDEA and IEPs, your post-secondary school does not have an obligation to provide you with an evaluation. It can choose to do so, but it does not have to evaluate you in the same way that maybe you were used to getting academic evaluation through high school. So again, this is just an example where you could potentially have VR pick up some of those additional supports and services. The school will have an interactive process that you'll go through to identify whatever proper adjustments or alternatives to the adjustments that you might need. So for example, if you need extra time to take a test, they might ask you, well, what's reasonable? Is 30 minutes enough extra time? And you might say, no, I actually need more like 45 minutes. And the school will say that's reasonable. And if the school feels like it is not reasonable, they'll talk with you about alternatives. If an adjustment isn't working, make sure you let your school know right away and work together to resolve the problem so that you're not going an entire semester or a quarter with academic adjustments or reasonable accommodations that aren't working for you. And I'm just going to take a minute and answer Kenny's question. Thank you, Kenny. Kenny writes, do these same rules apply for a transfer student? I'm starting at NAU as a transfer student. Yes, Kenny, you are able to avail yourself of these rights as well. And my friend and colleague Renee might have some thoughts about how you can get connected to the specific services at NAU. But yes, absolutely, you are protected by certainly Title II of the ADA and Section 504. Austin? So if you think a school is discriminating against you, and what that means is if they deny you your request for a reasonable accommodation or your request for an academic adjustment, usually the school will have a person who coordinates the school's compliance with Section 504, Title II, or both. So what that basically means is it's their job to make sure that the school is following the law. So that person might be called a Section 504 coordinator, an ADA coordinator, a disability services coordinator. Again, that's why it's important to familiarize yourself with what your school, the office looks like and who that person is. You will contact them and ask them for specific information about how to address your concerns. Again, schools might have different grievance procedures. You might be able to file a formal complaint or a written complaint at the school level. But it is important to ask for what your rights are. It should be no secret what your rights are or what the process is. You can ask specifically for the grievance procedures. They're typically included in a student handbook or a course catalog, but you should feel empowered and justified in asking for information about your rights. And the school should readily provide that information to you. If they don't, that's a problem, and you're welcome to contact us. If you feel like the school has not been able to resolve it at the school level, you then can file a formal complaint with the United States Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights or in a court. And again, the only option to enforce your rights under the Navajo Civil Rights Act is going to be to file a formal legal complaint in a Navajo Nation court that has jurisdiction. And again, a lot of this can be a lot to think about, and you might be thinking about it tomorrow or the next day. Please don't hesitate to contact us if you have specific questions or need more information. Austin? That was the end of my formal presentation. Unless anybody has a burning question for me right now, I'd be really happy to hand it over to my friend and colleague, Renee. And thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Alexis. Let me get the slideshow switched over. Let's see. Okay, everything look okay?
Yeah, it looks great. Thank you.
All right, take it away.
Yeah, so thank you all. I want to start first with thanking Alexis for giving me an introduction and kind of setting the stage for this upcoming presentation. I'm part of a program at through NAU, NAU's Institute for Human Development, called Supporting Inclusive Practices in Colleges. Most of you who may have been on this call may know this more as SIPC. So Austin, if you can switch the slide. So this is the agenda, and some of you on the phone may not be able to see this, but today we're gonna do some introductions of who we are, what is SIPC, the mission of our program, the core values, the goals, eligibility, and then we'll talk a little bit about our community partners and information on referral and contact. So right here is the first introduction is myself. My name is Rene Garcia-Aguirre. I'm the Zone 3 Northeast Arizona Campus Coordinator and Education Coach for SIPC. I'm also the NPC Northland Pioneer College representative for the program, as well as Red Mesa Unified School District's representative for SIPC as well. And if we go on to the next slides, I think Victoria might be here, but she may not be able to answer. But Jeremy Musgrove is our Zone 1 North Central Arizona Campus Coordinator and Education Coach. So this is primarily housed in Flagstaff, CCC, and NAU campuses. And he's also the representative at Coconino Community College. And the next slide. And my other colleague, Victoria Tosca, she's in Zone 2, which is Northwest Arizona, and includes Kingman, Lake Havasu, Fort Apache, Bullhead City, those areas right there. She is right there representing for Mojave Community College. She is their representative, and she also works directly with Kingman Unified School District. And I should add that Jeremy also works directly with FUSD, Flagstaff Unified School District in Flagstaff. So what is SIPSI? So we are a post-secondary transition support program. We serve students with intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities living in Northern Arizona. As I said at the beginning, we're housed at NAU through NAU's Institute for Human Development. We're grant funded by 2 separate grants. One is the TIPSID grant, which is through the Think College Initiative through the U.S. Department of Education. That grant, we got approved back in 2020. So we're running that grant cycle all the way to 2025. Hopefully we'll get that renewed. And the ADDPC grant, which is in-state grant. And that one will be running out at the end of this year, but I will also provide some more information in the slides to come. So next slide. This is a look at our zones, and I realize that some of you on the call may not be able to see this, but to those of you who can, this is kind of like a visual of the areas that we cover. As I said, Zone 1 is primarily Flagstaff, but it also includes Tuba City, as there is a CCC kind of representation down there, and the Page campus as well. Zone 1 also includes Colorado City up there on the border with Utah. And as I said, Zone 2 here, that's that whole area with Kingman, Bullhead City, Lake Havasu, all that area that encompasses MCC. That's where my colleague Victoria Tosca's at. And then to the far right, Zone 3, this is my area where I mostly cover. And as you can see, it goes into a couple of other states. I work in the Four Corners area as well. So Red Mesa Unified School District, there's some students who live on the Utah side, and there may be some students who live on the New Mexico side as well, who we also serve. We serve the entire Navajo Nation, and that includes Navajo Technical University. We have a partnership right now with NTU to develop a captioning program for students in general ed classes, to kind of like an accompany to their regular lecture, where students can reference these transcripts and these recordings to provide some deeper learning. And just if there's something that was missed, the students could always refer to those transcripts and create more of a dialogue between the students, the community, and the professors. And as you can see in my area too, if we go a little bit further south, that's the Show Low, Holbrook, Snowflake area. And it also includes the White Mountain Apache area. I believe one of my students may be on the call right now, calling in from the White Mountain area. And we're just really keen to serve the Northern Arizona area, but we're also very open to working with students throughout the state who are interested in attending one of these colleges up north, like NAU or one of these community colleges. The goal eventually is to expand throughout the state, so that there could be partnerships with all the in-state institutions, community colleges, and universities for the entire state. But right now we're in our beginning phases, and we're building up this program, but that is the broader vision in the years to come. So next slide, Austin. So a little bit about our mission here. We use what's called the front door first approach, and really is teaching students how to use the campus resources available to all students. So whether that's the academic advising services, the financial aid offices and counselors, the disability resources advisors. We want to coach and teach students how to utilize these services to promote inclusion and also to promote that authenticity in themselves, that, you know, everyone here is enough and has the ability to be successful in college. For some of us, there may need to be some accommodations for it to be equal, but that's what our program is here. We're here to identify ways to bring more equality within the college campuses and promote those self-advocacy skills. And then also we work directly with the institutions to let them know that, yes, we are on campus and we are serving students. And that may mean sometimes we sit in with a student during an academic advising appointment and help students ask those critical questions that are needed in order to transition to college or to get those accommodations that are necessary for students to be successful. I myself have sat on several academic advising meetings with my students, disability resource meetings with my students, even have gone to apartment kind of appointments to see some accommodations that that the students can move into. So we really try to provide a holistic approach to how we service and support students, but also we are there to coach them in developing those self-advocacy skills. And again, that authenticity to where they feel comfortable to engage with the resources on campus themselves. Another goal is to set the bar high for success. We want students to accomplish their dreams, to go for, you know, the jobs and the goals that they want to accomplish, whether that's becoming a veterinarian or studying abroad or to become a photographer. We want students to know that there is a pathway towards getting to these different dreams, these different goals that they would like to accomplish, and showing them the steps that need to be taken in order to get there. And it is a lot of work, but I think that students, when they see that there is a pathway towards that, that also builds that self-confidence and that belief in themselves that they should and can set the bar high for success, and accomplish their goals in post-secondary education. Next slide. These are some of our core values of what we implement into the program. A lot of it is around person-centered planning. We partner directly with the students. Some of my students who are in high school, we partner directly with their ESS teachers and their counselors to get feedback and to invite their voice into supporting the student. The student is the center of the plan that is being developed for them to be successful. So we want to integrate as many people who are there to support the student, whether that be the teachers, whether that is the parents, whether, you know, that could be a brother or a sister, whoever is there to support the student. And sometimes it's even being voc rehab counselors. We want to incorporate everyone in developing that circle of support for the student. Self-advocacy and self-determination. Self-advocacy, I spoke about previously, how that's something that we want to teach our students to do by learning how to learning of these resources, but then how do you access these resources? How do you communicate with these different offices in an effective way where you can voice your concerns or your needs and get the responses that you need in order to move forward. Self-determination, you know, developing that courage, that confidence within yourself to really continue to push forward despite setbacks that may come your way. One of my students who, you know, is on the call now is actually an inspiration to me, because this student, despite, you know, many harsh setbacks, this student has stayed very much focused on continuing to make strides towards going to college. And now they're in a position where, they're going to start in the fall semester, and we're very much looking forward to their success. We also work with different agencies. As I said, the community colleges are one aspect. We also work with the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services. We're developing this partnership now with the Native American Disability Law Center, and we're just really looking to collaborate with anyone in the community that is focused on success for students with disability. We also promote dual enrollment. So at Red Mesa Unified School District, they have a very good dual enrollment program that is connected with Northland Pioneer College. The goal is that more students take advantage of these sort of programs to get their general education courses out of the way. That kind of builds that confidence, that self-determination too, to move forward towards the degree they're looking for. That adaptive education coaching model, and in my zone, I can say that, I am willing to meet with a student in any format that they would like to meet. And some students are cool with meeting over Zoom and getting help that way. And some need that one-on-one coaching, that one-on-one approach, and meeting up at the college to start talking to officials down there to get their schedule or whatever they need to start their college career. We're there to meet the student halfway, wherever they're at. Wherever they're at, we're there. If the student's putting 110%, we're putting 150%. We are there with you, and we work from the ground up. And that may start with learning how to fill out a college admission form and understanding the FAFSA process, the financial aid application process, and going through that. There's a lot of challenges, as many of you know, in Indian communities, where the information that these applications ask for isn't always considerate of some of the differences in Native communities. So we're here to help you work through that and help you find a way through that and hack those problems, not let it be a problem that holds you back. How can we look at this problem and in a very like a computer futuristic kind of way? How do we hack this problem so that we can create access and we can continue to move forward? We also have peer mentoring, mostly through our Zone 1 area. These are students who are in the NAU programs themselves, becoming teachers, who are there to support our students, not only with their academic piece, but also their social piece. We have, some, game nights that we organize, and maybe all go to a football game or a basketball game, and maybe they just call in and check up on students and say, hey, how's your week going? And, what are some things that that you would like to participate in college, and helping those students get connected with that and helping them make friends. Personal technology support. So we just recently ordered some technology for our students. Some of our students don't have access to all the technology they need to start college. So we're starting a loan library where students can borrow some of this technology and utilize it during the semester. And the goal is to eventually get into a paying job, a profession, the students' goals and dreams. So we start talking about that very early on. How do we develop resumes? Maybe we need to go to a job fair and kind of look at the field and who's hiring and what are some of the questions and qualities that they are looking for. So I've done that with several of my students, and some may be on right now. So, it's really looking at the whole post-secondary process in a very holistic way. And how do we use the resources around us to continue on that path towards your dreams? So next slide, please. So these are some of our goals, program goals. So it's really to improve the outcomes for individuals with intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities participating in post-secondary education experiences. So that's a very dry way, but basically what that means is like college, right? Participating in college, but not just college. It could also be a vocational school. It could be something like ITT Tech. It could be a program on Coursera where maybe you get a Google IT certificate that allows you to work in that field in IT. Whatever the student wants to do to continue their education, it doesn't have to be college, any kind of certification that leads to gainful employment, we are here to provide those supports, again, through that person-centered model, that education coaches, and really pushing that full inclusion on in the institutional environment, whether that's a college campus or a program online. Whatever it is, we want students to be fully included in those environments. And the ultimate goal is to help students reach that point where independent living and gainful employment is there for them. So next slide, please. Our goals on the academic side are for students to obtain a meaningful college credential in any field. So any kind of credential, how we kind of describe that. It could be a certificate that is industry recognized. It could be an associate's. It could be a bachelor's. Any kind of credential that leads to a job, we are here to support students on. We are also working with academic advisors on campus. Many of them know who we are already because we have been participating in those individual academic advising meetings. And we've gotten to the point where academic advisors sometimes are even sending students to us to get some further assistance. And identify and expand awareness around assistive technology. One of the great things about being a part of the Institute for Human Development at NAU is that we have a great program in the Arizona Technology Assistance Program. This is one area. They're based out of Phoenix, but they're able to ship assistive technology to anywhere in the state. And basically they have 36,000 pieces of assistive technology for people with disabilities to use to be successful, whether that's in their job, whether that's in their education, or even just for leisure. They're there to get you connected with the appropriate assistive technology. They hold meetings where they can prescribe those different types of assistive technologies, and we get students connected with them who may need that kind of service. We also are here to help implement and professional development training for organizations and institutions for faculty and staff. That could mean, inclusive recruiting for college campuses. That could mean what does, transitioning to college look like for somebody for disabilities. There's a lot of different types of professional development trainings that we can offer. And if an organization wants us to offer a specific professional development training, all they have to do is reach out to us and we can definitely set something up. Next slide, please. So one of our other goals is also expanding the social aspect of post-secondary education. So students participating in person on campus, if that's the way they want to go, if that's what they're looking for, that traditional kind of experience, we want them to experience all the things that come with that, whether that means joining a club, maybe joining a fraternity, sorority, or getting involved with your local Native American student organization. We want students to get those experiences, start building that network of people who can expand their circle of support, and connecting in online class as well. That may mean some coaching on how to use the discussion board and how to follow up with different classmates if there's questions about classes or the assignments. That can be done through the education coaching or the peer mentors as well. We also have a social media presence, and we want students to get connected with that. And one thing that we do for students throughout the academic year, once a month, is student sessions. And these student sessions are a chance for all students in the program to kind of meet together via Zoom to discuss some important topics that may be coming up in their current semester. Maybe midterms are coming up, and we need to talk about some tips and some ideas for students to stay on top of that, or final exams, or even just starting college. We have some orientation sessions planned for our students to kind of give them a heads up of what they need to be looking for and what they need to be paying attention to. Next slide. And again, this slide right here really talks about, looking at all the career opportunities, work study opportunities. So I had a student who's very interested in computer science, and they're about getting ready to wrap up their Google IT certification, but didn't really have any experience in the field. So we called around and talked to the IT people at his college, and got the chance to set up a little kind of, informal kind of work study kind of thing, where he worked with the IT department during the summer and got that hands-on training on what it's like to work in the field. And it actually went really good for him. So we're hoping that this could lead into opportunities further down the way. We want students to get involved in internships, those type of opportunities, especially during a college application, college period, sorry, because those are the type of experiences that take your resume so much more further than just a college degree. I used to, when I was an academic advisor at the U of A, there was a lot of students who would get degrees and sometimes wouldn't even get a job offer. But the students who we saw really getting jobs straight out of college are the students who took advantage of those internship and research opportunities. And part of our job is to help students be aware of those opportunities, but also get connected with those opportunities so they could expand their resume as they're a college student. And also getting that study abroad experience. Some of my students are interested in studying abroad and looking at other cultures around the world and having that opportunity. Those are the type of experience that we promote within our program. Anything that can expand the student, not just academically, but individually as a person, we are here to support. And as I said, we have a strong relationship with Red Mesa Unified School District, the Navajo Nation's Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services, NTU, Dannett College, and we're always looking to expand our friendships and partnerships throughout the reservation. Next slide, please. So who is eligible for SIPC? So it says here individuals aged between 18 to 26 with an intellectual disability and or developmental disability. But pretty quickly in our program, we realized that there are people who are older than 26 who need that extra assistance, that help to go to college. So that's not a hard number that we fall on. We have students much older than 26 that we support all throughout Arizona. And it's really anyone attending college in Northern Arizona regions, the ones that I said before, the Central, the Northwest, Northeast, and anyone who's seeking to get some kind of meaningful credential. As I said, that could be an associate's, that could be a certificate, that could be a cosmetology certificate, anything that's gonna lead to a job. We're here to support students with that. Next slide. And this slide is really some of our community partners. So this is from Zone 1. We have Coconino Community College and NAU. Coconino Community College is one of our greatest partnerships because of the CCC to NAU program. The CCC to NAU program allows students to attend community college classes while living on NAU campus, utilizing the dorms and really the resources that NAU has, while paying a much cheaper tuition at Coconino Community College. So we have currently 3 students who are making that transition from the Navajo Nation. And hey, we're open to having more. So that's one of ours. Next slide. The other slide is the Mojave Community College. As I said, that's in Zone 2. There's campuses in Bullhead City, Kingman, Lake Havasu, and North Mojave. I believe the North Mojave one is in Fort Apache, if I'm not mistaken. But yes, this is another great resource for our community in Northern Arizona. And then the last slide is Northland Pioneer College. So as you can see, there are many different campuses and centers for NPC. There's Holbrook, there's Show Low, Winslow, Snowflake, Taylor. They have the center in Hopi and Kayenta, Springerville, St. John's, White River. So, anywhere, any one of these campuses, we can provide services for students there locally. And next slide. And these are some of our high school partners at the moment. So it's Flagstaff Unified School District, as I mentioned, Kingman Unified School District, and currently Red Mesa Unified School District. We are always open to expanding school districts that want to partner with us. So, if you guys got any ideas, let us know. Next slide, please. And these are some of our other ones. As I said, the Arizona Developmental Disabilities Planning Council. This is one of our grants that we've had that's kind of ending this year, but we still have that strong partnership with them. The Arizona Department of Economic Security, as I mentioned, the ASTAP program, Arizona Technology Access Program, any of the statewide vocational rehabilitation center. AverTech is one of our other programs through the IHD that offers resources for VR programs, working directly in Indian and indigenous country. They are there providing different types of training related to providing those services in those areas. And then, of course, the Navajo Nation Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services and the Native American Disability Law Center. So next slide. So, this last slide is really how to get connected. And I realize some of you on the call may not be able to see this. So I'll put it in the chat, our little website there where you can fill out the interest form. But if you're able to see this, we do have a QR code. If you hold your camera's your phone's camera to this QR code, it should allow you to automatically connect to our interest form. And it's very easy to fill out. We're just basically asking for your name, your contact information, and we'll reach out within 1 to 2 business days. Excuse me. I also have my cell phone number there. And for those of you on the call, sorry, that cell number is 409-234-4692. Again, that's 409-234-4692. And then my email is rene.garciurre@nau.edu. I'm sorry, that's a long name, but if you're able to see this, please take a picture and reach out to us. And I'm here if anyone has any questions, any comments, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Renee. And thank you, Alexis. Those were 2 great presentations. I see we do have some hands up and we have some time for questions. So unless you 2 have any closing comments, I can start allowing people to ask some questions.
Yeah, that sounds great. Austin. Thank you.
Okay, so Jane has her hand up, so I'm gonna allow you to ask your question. You should be able to unmute.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jane. Good evening.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. It was really a wonderful presentation. Like, I would like to introduce myself. I am Jane Derecho. I'm working at Red Mesa Unified School District, and I'm working with Renee actually. That's why I attended this webinar, because I am from Philippines actually. So I'm working with my high school student, which is like, this is not really a question, but it's just like a comment and a feedback. Like, for me, coming from Philippines, I really envy how my students are here in the USA, especially in the reservation, how fortunate they are. Like, for those students who are here, I just want to just highlight that how fortunate they are, because we can see there's a lot of like this SIPC, and as many as you mentioned, that really help student with special need, compared to us. I mean, in the Philippines, we don't get this much of help. So it's really wonderful to know, and all the rights of Native American student, which I'm learning from now, and I can help more my student in transition to the university, and I can help them, encourage them to stand up what's their right. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jane. And I just got to say, Jane is one of those ESS teachers who is super dedicated to helping her students find access. And so it's great when we have people in the community who are dedicated and want to help you succeed. So if you know someone like that, please reach out to them. And as I said, our contact information is here, and I'd be happy to work with anyone who needs some assistance or some help.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, I think Renee might have just replied to this one. The question was from Kenny saying, I did an interview, but have not received any additional info. I'm thinking maybe when classes are about to start, I will get more info.
Yeah, sometimes at least with the disability resource offices that we see at CCC, a lot of those accommodations are sometimes right before the beginning of the semester, but that's not to say that it's not good to follow up and make sure that your information has been received, and getting some feedback from those offices of when you can expect to get some more information back, Kenny. So I kind of left you my email there. So if you reach out to me, we can kind of look at, what's been done, and I can give you some more information, and maybe even me myself, I can reach out to their offices and see if we can get you a response pretty quickly.
Okay. I'm not seeing any more questions or hand raised. So we still do have a few minutes if anybody has any questions they want to ask before we wrap up and end today's session.
Just one more thing. Can we get those copy of the presentation that was Miss Alexis showed up a while ago? Do you provide that copy of the PowerPoint?
Right, we can make copies and email those out to you guys as well if you want to leave your email in the chat. And then, like I said at the beginning too, a recording of the webinar will be posted on our website and on YouTube to see those. But yeah, we can definitely get out a copy of the slides if you leave your email in the chat for us.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hearing nothing else, I just want to say thank you, Renee, for joining us this evening, afternoon and evening, and sharing this really important information. And thank you to everybody who joined the webinar. We're really pleased to be putting these on, and happy to hear the feedback that the information is helpful. Like I said, this can be a complicated area of law, and it can be confusing to know where to turn, but please feel free to reach out to Renee or myself at the Native American Disability Law Center, and really appreciate everyone attending. So thank you.
Okay, I think that's going to wrap up the webinar. So again, thank you everybody for coming and participating, and we hope to see you at the next presentation, which will be August 11th. And you can expect more information to come out as we get closer.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.